It's 2025, and even though the Valve Deckard still isn't out, you have a lot of choices when it comes to VR headsets. Although I wouldn't go as far as to say that the industry has matured, compared to just 5 years ago in 2020, when your options were Quest 2, Vive Cosmos, or the Valve Index, today's market looks a lot more competitive, with repeat releases from Meta, early forays by Samsung and Apple, Pico taking over the Chinese market, and even startups finding success like the software turned hardware company Big Screen. Regrettably, the state of full body tracking isn't really in the same spot. Not only is it incredibly expensive, in some cases surpassing the cost of a standalone headset like the Quest 3, there have been few consumer product releases from industry players. Let's have a look at what the options are. HTC Vive's 3.0 tracker, still considered the standard for tracking quality today, was released in 2021. Hunter trackers in 2022, as well as Harator X, Makopi in 2023, and Pico motion trackers in 2024. And of course, there's SlimeVR. It's been around since 2021, longer than most competitors. It's actively maintained, and it's completely hardware agnostic, meaning you don't need base stations to use it. In the case of Makopi and Harator X, you can actually run SlimeVR software on it, and many users choose to do so. So, why is nobody talking about it? In October, I had the opportunity to visit the SlimeVR Cave in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, where I got to meet the growing team and learn about their work. Today I'm talking about the state of SlimeVR in 2025, sharing with you what I learned from my visit to the cave, and focusing on what has changed since the start of the project to now. I was given a review set of trackers to experiment with, and I'm wearing them while recording this video. This video is not sponsored by SlimeVR, and they have no restrictions on what I talk about, but I did ask them to check it for information accuracy. The topics I'm covering include a brief reintroduction to the project, how tracking quality has changed over the years as well as user experience, talk about shipping times and supply chain, future projects of the team, and then share my personal thoughts on using the trackers these past couple of weeks. Since its inception, SlimeVR has grown both in terms of number of contributors and overall project scale. The current focus is to push IMU-based full-body tracking to the absolute limits. At the time of my visit, it had been a really long time since I had last used slime trackers, so one of my first questions was what they had been doing to improve the tracking quality of their existing products. From a firmware side, SlimeVR's noble quest, if you will, is to discover the ideal IMU parameters for full body tracking. And it took me a little while to understand what an IMU parameter was, but basically they are values that the SlimeVR team tweaks and they impact the tracking behavior. For example, certain values could result in higher resolution tracking, more responsive to minute movements, but could also result in more jitter. So they're trying to hone in exactly on what those numbers are, and they've been closer and closer throughout their whole journey of development. From a software side, they've been hard at work as well. Their newest feature, which is called Stay Aligned, helps to reduce the drift that users might encounter in common poses, for example, sitting, standing, and laying down. It accounts for drift by saving a common pose, so for example, saving a sitting pose, and then gradually adjusting towards that pose over time to kind of counteract any drift that might be occurring. And this is an optional feature that you could turn on and off. There's also now official support for hybrid tracking with positional trackers like Vive 3.0s. From a hardware side, they just released SlimeVR 1.2s, which have a new ICM 45686 IMU as well as a magnometer, and because they are more thermally stable, they're less prone to drift. As far as my experiences with the improved tracking quality, I will talk about it later in the personal reflection section of this video. The other software advance I am really excited about is a complete overhaul of the onboarding process within the SlimeVR server. The SlimeVR server is the desktop or mobile or Quest or whatever application that your slime trackers run through in order to actually calculate the positional data and send that data to SteamVR or another platform of your choice. One of the biggest headaches myself and many other people had with slime trackers was the setup process, because you have to turn the trackers on, pair them, and then even after that, there's a lot of steps that it takes to learn how to calibrate properly, learn how to set your proportions and everything. As you can see in this clip where Polymoria is walking me through the new setup process, it should make setting up slime trackers so much easier, and it will be coming out soon. Next, I sat down with Aaron and Polymoria, the co-creators of SlimeVR, to talk about the exciting world of supply chain. When SlimeVR was first launched, there was a lot of controversy around shipping times because it took upwards of a year for a lot of backers to receive their initial orders. There were a lot of factors that led to this, but the number one factor was the global chip shortage happening around the time of COVID, and that was impacting supply chains everywhere. It has been 3 years since then, so I wanted to know what SlimeVR's current production process looks like, and whether or not people are still experiencing these issues. The current state of affairs is that SlimeVR has an exclusivity deal with Mouser, who is the owner of Crowd Supply. When you order slime trackers, you're ordering them from stock that Mouser has purchased based on their sales estimate. This estimate comes from the number of pre-orders plus a little bit of extra that typically sells out in a week or so. So the short answer is you are ordering trackers from Mouser, and Mouser is ordering trackers from SlimeVR. The longer answer is supply chain is really, really complicated. Behind the scenes, Mouser has an estimate that goes to the SlimeVR team, and then SlimeVR works with manufacturers to acquire all the parts needed to fulfill that order. Parts hang out in the SlimeVR Cave in the Netherlands, while the SlimeVR team tests every single one of the PCBs. Once SlimeVR has accumulated all of these straps, boxes, sticker sheets, cases, PCBs, batteries, screws, and everything else you need to make a set of slime trackers, all the parts go to Chain Logistics to be assembled and tested before returning to the cave where some of the sets are inspected. Once everything looks okay, the entire shipment goes to Crowd Supply, which is based in the United States, meaning it has to pass through US Customs, where then Crowd Supply fulfills all of the orders to customers worldwide. Unlike industry giants like HTC, the creators of the Vive tracker, SlimeVR can't just have thousands of sets on hand. Instead, they need to wait on Crowd Supply to order for them before producing trackers, so the amount of time you will have to wait on an order depends on whether or not you're ordering from their existing stock, or if you are pre-ordering from the next Crowd Supply shipment. As of October 2025, the 14th shipment was sent out to backers worldwide, and each shipment has been bigger than the last, so the total number of sets shipped, according to this date, is 27,569, which is an estimated 190,000 trackers, including extensions, shipped total. Finally, the most exciting part of my visit was when I got to learn about the future projects of SlimeVR. The closest project to release is the Butterfly Slime, which is a smaller and lighter evolution of the slime tracker. And it's in the final steps of the development process, which include fixing minor tracking bugs, designing the charging dock add-on, and then improving the durability of the Flex connector. Speaking of the Flex connector durability, Polymoria let me rip various old iterations in half, and she actually even repaired them in front of me, which I felt bad about, and explained what changes were being made to make them stronger with each iteration. And they want to make certain that it is durable before it is released. At the time of recording this, they're at hardware revision number 11 for the butterflies. The coolest thing about seeing this project come to fruition is understanding just how much feedback they took into account while making the next iteration of their trackers. My 3 favorite features of the butterfly slimes are direct improvements on feedback from their original slimes. So the butterfly slimes use a USB antenna, meaning you don't need to fiddle with Wi-Fi anymore, and this antenna is to be used with PC Android phone, and they have plans to expand to Quest as well, so you'd be able to plug it into your Quest device. Butterflies are also small enough to replace extensions, which are my least favorite hardware feature of the Slime 1.2s. In order to use an extension with the Slime 1.2s, you have to run a cable down, and it's kind of finicky, and then if you don't have the cable in, you have to put a protector cap in, and it's just really kind of a lot of moving parts. But butterfly slimes are small enough where you don't have to worry about that. You can also Velcro them or tuck them in anywhere where you might want a tracker, and it's significantly smaller and, importantly, flatter than any of the other trackers on the market. And finally, there's a change that's actually compatible with all of their trackers, and those are quick release clips that make using the straps a lot easier. So instead of having to finick with the Velcro and take it on and off every single time, you have what's closer to competitor straps like EOS, where you can just keep it one size and then hook and unhook it very quickly. The biggest upgrades are definitely mostly on the hardware side, by far the lightest and most comfortable tracking I've tried. And then from the software side, the tracking performance is comparable to those of Slime 1.2s. If you want to keep following the development of the butterfly slimes, which are targeted to open crowdfunding in December of 2025 this year, you can follow their pre-launch page, which I'll link somewhere in the description probably. And beyond that, they're in the early development stages of other new hardware, such as slam tracking, haptic pucks, and even finger tracking gloves. These projects are in very early development, but I was able to confirm with Aaron that the gloves will be IMU-based tracking, and that all projects, both hardware and software, will always be open source, as they always have been. I wanted to give a huge thank you to all of the members of the team who welcomed me to the SlimeVR Cave and were so willing to showcase all of the really exciting projects. I really appreciate how transparent everybody was, even about stuff like delays or like unexpected things that do occur. So I really do appreciate that. And I wish you the best of luck with development moving forward. In this last section of the video, I'm going to talk about my personal experiences having used slime trackers for a couple of weeks now, and how that compares to when I first tried them way back in 2022. Back then, I built my own set of trackers, used them for about 6 months, and then eventually moved on to Vive 3.0s when they were given to me as a gift. And quite frankly, at the time, the tracking quality of Vive 3.0s was significantly better, so I never looked back. But since then, SlimeVR's schematics have changed, supporting later and greater IMUs and software, and they've shipped official trackers, assembled and rigorously tested by professionals. The set that I have contains Slime 1.2s, which is the latest version, and I suspect a lot of people's impressions of SlimeVR are based on what they saw when SlimeVR was first released, and that was certainly the case for me. There's a lot of factors that contribute to how much drift I experience. I notice if I'm doing a lot of really quick active movements, it tends to drift faster, or maybe my trackers just shift. But if I am sitting still, standing still, lounging, talking like this, I haven't really noticed any issues, and even then, it's maybe once every hour and a half where I'll do a reset. I've been recording this video for about an hour, and I haven't had to do a full recalibration or a reset at all. When I stood up and moved from over there to over here, all I did was stood straight, double checked my chest tracker, and then it basically reset the yaw, and I'm good to go. I've only did that once, and I've been fine. The caveat to this is it took a lot of tweaking to get to this quality of tracking. Compared to competitors like Vive trackers, which have a pretty uniform performance out of the box, slime tracking will start out fairly average, and then improve as you discover which settings you prefer, set your body proportions, learn how to calibrate properly, etc. It took me probably 5 or 6 different VR sessions, as well as asking questions in their Discord on, am I mounting this right? Am I doing the calibration pose correctly? What settings are best for what thing? And what I learned is I actually prefer different tracking settings for different activities. So if I'm lounging around, I might prefer more smoothing, but if I'm being active, I want that snappier tracking. I want reduced latency. The tweaking of all of the tracking settings was the difficult part, but the actual out-of-the-box setup was fairly straightforward. It took me about 15-20 minutes to do, and this was a one-time setup step of pairing the trackers to Wi-Fi, and then every time I get into VR, I have about 2 to 3 minutes of calibration, so I have to do the eye pose, and then do the ski pose to set the mounting orientation, and that's it. Here's a diagram I made for transparency purposes of how the Slime trackers compare to the Vive trackers in terms of setup process. The truth is you will be spending time changing settings, and if you don't want to problem solve on your own, you can go in their Discord and ask for help, but it will take a little bit of time. Aside from the setup process, how good is slime tracking actually? Well, the answer is it kind of depends on what you're doing. For lounging around and being social, I think slime is quickly becoming my preferred method of tracker, simply because it's more comfortable than Vive trackers and it can't be occluded, that's it. The tracking quality is good enough where if I'm lounging, it doesn't matter if there's a little bit of an offset or a little bit of drift, because I can just take the time to reset it. That being said, for really fast movements, being active, dancing, I do think that Vive tracker is still superior. Additionally, there's some positional tracking elements needed to capture certain hip and chest movements that, because slimes are rotation only based, it can't quite capture the squash and stretch that you can get with Vive trackers. That being said, when you consider the price, especially if you are a Quest user or somebody who does not have base station tracking, SlimeVR's tracking will get you 90% of the way there of what you would want for a full body tracking solution compared to Vive trackers, the industry standard. I'm actually most interested in hybrid tracking solutions, especially now that SlimeVR supports Vive 3.0s as well as other products like Harator X and Mokopi inside of their ecosystem, and that more and more headsets are being released without support for base stations. In an ideal world, you would pick exactly which type of tracker or tracking you'd want for each body part, because truth be told, there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all solution for full body tracking. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you found it informative, and I hope it helped you develop some opinions about how the SlimeVR project has moved forward over the past couple of years. Huge thank you as well to the Slime team for making this possible, between sending me the trackers as well as having me visit your cave. It was a wonderful experience, and I wish you all the best moving forward with the project. I don't usually request that people comment on my videos because I'm not particularly interested in boosting metrics or anything like that. However, I do want to pass on some of the questions that SlimeVR asked me to continue to the discussion about the future of full body tracking and hopefully help them out with their future projects. First and foremost, based on your experience with slime trackers or what you learned today, what feedback do you have for the SlimeVR team? Secondly, which of their future projects, from the slime tracking to the butterflies to the gloves, excites you the most? And finally, what does your perfect vision of full body tracking look like, however futuristic it may be? That's all I have for today, but I'm sure I'll see you in 3 to 5 months or whenever it is I decide to make another YouTube video. Bye!